Did Harry and Meghan just cross the line? And now Buckingham Palace wants them gone for good? Imagine waking up one morning to find that your every move, every word, every private decision is under intense scrutiny, not just by the world, but by your own family. That's exactly the position the Duke and Duchess of Sussex may have found themselves in. For years, they have walked a tightrope between public adoration and intense media criticism, flaunting their independence while challenging centuries of tradition. But now, Buckingham Palace isn't just watching, it's striking back, and this time, it's personal. The palace's latest legal action against Harry and Meghan isn't just another headline. It's a full-scale statement. Privacy, tradition, and loyalty are not optional. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it. In a world where every celebrity can make a public statement, why does the palace care so deeply about privacy? The answer lies in history. The monarchy has always operated behind closed doors, where loyalty is sacred and secrets are currency. Breaking those unspoken rules can have devastating consequences. And Harry and Meghan? They have a history of pushing boundaries, of telling their story on their own terms, of bypassing the traditional channels the royal family has relied on for centuries to manage both their image and their secrets. The palace is furious, not just because of media leaks or unauthorized interviews, but because this breach strikes at the very heart of royal authority. It all started with subtle moves, almost invisible to the public eye. An offhand comment here, a leaked photo there, private communications shared with journalists, or an exclusive deal that made the world gasp. These moments were small individually, but together they painted a picture of a couple unwilling to play by the established rules. The palace, which once tolerated even small breaches, finally decided enough is enough. But what exactly did Harry and Meghan do that pushed Buckingham Palace to this unprecedented legal action? The answer is complicated, layered, and far more dramatic than most of us ever imagined. At its core, the lawsuit isn't just about laws or protocols. It's about trust. Trust that was built over centuries and shattered in mere years. It's about a family, a dynasty, being forced to respond to actions that challenge not only its authority, but its very relevance in a modern world obsessed with transparency and scandal. The palace's anger is palpable. Sources say that internal meetings became heated, with discussions about strategy, public messaging, and even potential repercussions for the couple. Every advisor, every aide, every legal counsel had a role to play, balancing the public's appetite for gossip with the family's need to protect its image. And for Harry and Meghan, the stakes could not be higher. Let's consider the consequences. If the palace wins, it sets a precedent for royal privacy that could influence every member of the family, now and in the future. But if Harry and Meghan manage to evade consequences, it could embolden them and others, potentially unraveling decades of carefully maintained control. The lawsuit is about power, yes, but also about legacy. Every page of the legal documents, every leaked communication, every behind-the-scenes conversation contributes to a narrative of betrayal, audacity, and confrontation. The stakes are both deeply personal and spectacularly public. And then there's the media frenzy. Almost immediately, tabloids, online news outlets, social media influencers, and royal watchers began dissecting every word, every rumor, every hint of scandal. Some reports painted Harry and Meghan as fearless truth-tellers, standing up to an outdated system. Others depicted them as reckless rebels, flouting tradition and decorum. The reality? It's a complex mix of both, a story full of contradictions, twists, and human emotion. People argue, debate, and speculate, but only a few insiders really understand what happened behind closed doors. And those whispers suggest there's far more at play than just privacy breaches. The legal aspect is equally fascinating. Allegedly, the palace's suit includes claims that Harry and Meghan intentionally circumvented established privacy measures, taking advantage of loopholes, media contacts, and secret communications. This isn't just about accidental slip-ups or unguarded moments. The palace believes there was intention, calculation, and an awareness of the rules being broken. But how do you prove that intention? That's where evidence, strategy, and timing become crucial. Sources hint at documents, correspondences, and recordings that could spell trouble. And some of these details might completely redefine what the public thought they knew about the couple. Even more striking is the emotional dimension. Royals, after all, are human beings with feelings, egos, and vulnerabilities. Behind the pomp, the ceremonies, and the public appearances, the lawsuit exposes tension, disappointment, and perhaps even betrayal. Imagine a family member feeling violated because the people they trusted most are operating in secret, in ways that could jeopardize not just their image but their safety, reputation, and authority. That is the heart of the story, an intimate, emotional conflict made public on an unprecedented scale. And for the Sussexes, the stakes are as much about perception as they are about legality. How do you defend yourself against a family you once swore to honor, against a system older than most nations? But let's pause and ask the big question. Why now? Why has Buckingham Palace waited until this moment to take legal action? Some insiders suggest it's a culmination of repeated offenses, a breaking point reached after years of tolerance. Others say external pressures, media leaks, public scrutiny, and political implications made a strong response inevitable. The timing, as always with royal affairs, is strategic. The palace wants to assert authority, but it also needs to manage optics, balancing a firm response with a careful public image. In other words, this isn't just a lawsuit. It's a carefully orchestrated message, a statement that tradition and family loyalty are non-negotiable. And yet, there's an undeniable irony in all this. Harry and Meghan, often portrayed as modern, forward-thinking, and media-savvy, now find themselves at the mercy of the very institution they challenged. They sought freedom, autonomy, and a voice, but freedom comes with consequences, especially when the rules you defy belong to a centuries-old monarchy. Public sympathy is split. Some admire their courage, while others criticize their recklessness. But the palace doesn't care about public opinion. It cares about control. And that tension between individual freedom and institutional authority drives the drama, suspense, and emotional stakes of this entire saga. Consider the ripple effects. What happens to the monarchy if the palace loses credibility? How will the public respond if this lawsuit unearths secrets long thought buried? Could this conflict redefine the relationship between royals and the press? And most importantly, what does this mean for Harry and Meghan personally? Financially, emotionally, and socially? Every element of this story has a ripple effect, creating waves that extend far beyond the palace walls. The narrative is no longer just about privacy. It's about power, family, legacy, and survival. But here's the kicker. Even with all this legal maneuvering and emotional tension, the most shocking revelations are still under wraps. Rumors of confidential communications, clandestine meetings, and evidence that could change everything have begun to surface. Sources insist that some of what Buckingham Palace has uncovered could redefine the public's understanding of Harry and Meghan's time as working royals. And that's where this story becomes irresistible. What secrets are so powerful, so damning, that a royal institution is willing to go to court to keep them private? The answer, as we will discover, is far more dramatic than anyone anticipated. The stakes are monumental. Harry and Meghan are navigating a labyrinth of scrutiny, judgment, and strategic moves while the palace closes in. Every action, every statement, every media appearance is now amplified through the lens of this conflict. Meanwhile, the public waits, captivated, divided, and eager for every new development. This isn't just a lawsuit. It's a public drama with legal, emotional, and historical consequences, and we are watching it unfold in real time. Did you ever stop to think what it would be like to have your every move tracked, every word judged, every action dissected by millions, including your own family? That's exactly the world Harry and Meghan have been living in for years. But in the history of the monarchy, few moments have been as explosive as what's now unfolding. The palace isn't just annoyed. It's in crisis mode. And it all begins with a storm nobody saw coming. A storm of secrecy, betrayal, and legal firepower. Imagine the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, corridors lined with centuries of portraits, chandeliers reflecting the weight of tradition, and a sense of order that has survived generations. In the past, this order was rarely questioned. Royals followed protocols, advisors whispered in corridors, and the media respected, or at least played along with, the unwritten rules. But that world is changing, and the catalyst? Harry and Meghan. Their decision to break free from the constraints of royal life, to speak openly to the world, and to define their own narrative shook the very foundations of this institution. The result is what insiders are calling the royal privacy storm. It began subtly. A casual interview, a brief statement, a leaked anecdote, small moments that seemed harmless on the surface. But those moments, strung together, painted a picture of a couple unwilling to adhere to centuries of protocol. And the palace noticed. Every breach of discretion, every avoidance of privacy rules, was cataloged, analyzed, and ultimately stored as potential evidence for a future confrontation. For Harry and Meghan, it may have seemed like freedom. For the palace, it was a ticking time bomb. So why is privacy so crucial for the royals? It's more than just tradition or image. Privacy is power. The monarchy has survived through the careful management of public perception, through a delicate balance of openness and secrecy. If the rules that govern privacy are violated, the consequences ripple far beyond a single interview or a leaked photograph. It challenges authority, undermines loyalty, and threatens the very narrative the family has worked to maintain for generations. And according to insiders, Harry and Meghan's actions crossed lines that even the most tolerant royals could no longer ignore. The tension escalated during events that were supposed to be minor. Private family gatherings, ceremonial appearances, and even casual encounters became pressure cookers of scrutiny. Advisors and aides began noticing patterns, not just media attention, but deliberate attempts to bypass established protocols. Some of these instances were subtle. Emails routed through unofficial channels, meetings held off-site without notice, communications that hinted at plans not yet made public. Each action seemed calculated to assert independence while undermining the authority of the palace. And that's where the emotional stakes come in. Royals are human beings. They have egos, vulnerabilities, and deeply personal expectations of loyalty. When trust is broken, it's not just about rules, it's about feelings. Sources suggest that Queen Elizabeth's inner circle felt a profound sense of betrayal, a quiet but simmering anger that grew over months and years. Conversations behind closed doors reportedly became heated, advisors clashed over strategy, and debates raged over whether to handle these breaches quietly or confront them publicly. By the time the lawsuit was filed, tensions had reached a boiling point. The media frenzy amplified everything. Every small leak became a global headline, every private moment dissected in detail. Tabloids thrived on the drama, social media exploded with opinion and speculation, and the public debated fiercely. Some praised Harry and Meghan as champions of transparency, breaking free from outdated structures. Others criticized them as reckless rebels, flaunting tradition and decorum without regard for consequences. But the truth is more complex, layered with contradictions and emotional nuance. And that complexity is exactly what makes the story so compelling. Even as the public consumed the drama, behind the scenes, legal minds at Buckingham Palace were preparing a comprehensive strategy. They weren't just responding to public outrage. They were meticulously building a case that documented breaches of privacy, alleged manipulations of media channels, and evidence suggesting intentional circumvention of established protocols. Every detail mattered. Every misstep by Harry and Meghan became a potential legal leverage point. And as the documents piled up, so did the stakes. What's even more striking is how personal this conflict became. It wasn't just about privacy violations or protocol breaches. It was about family. Sources describe late-night meetings filled with tension, where words like betrayal, disappointment, and anger were whispered in the corridors of the palace. The palace's legal action wasn't just a professional response. It was an emotional one. And Harry and Meghan, despite their public persona of confidence and composure, were reportedly aware that this storm could reach them in ways they hadn't anticipated. The stakes extend far beyond the immediate family. A successful lawsuit reinforces the authority of the monarchy, sets a precedent for handling privacy violations, and sends a clear message to the public and the media. A failed response, however, could embolden not just Harry and Meghan, but future generations, threatening to erode centuries of carefully maintained control. Every meeting, every statement, every media appearance becomes part of a high-stakes chess game, with the world watching. But here's the twist. Even as the palace moved forward, some sources claim there were moments of hesitation. Royal advisors debated over optics, over how the public might perceive an aggressive legal response. Some feared backlash, while others argued that failing to act would signal weakness. This internal conflict adds another layer of drama, revealing the human element behind the stoic facade of tradition. It's not just strategy, it's emotion, ego, and history colliding. And yet, despite all the planning and preparation, the most explosive developments were still hidden. Rumors began circulating about secret communications, clandestine meetings, and documents that could change the narrative entirely. Insiders hinted that some of the information the palace had uncovered might challenge everything the public believed about the couple. The potential for shock was enormous. So, what does this mean for Harry and Meghan personally? Beyond the legal documents and media scrutiny lies a deeply human story: ambition, defiance, fear, and desire for independence. The couple's attempts to carve out their own path collided with centuries of expectation, creating a storm of unprecedented scale. Public perception is divided. Some sympathize with their quest for freedom, others condemn their audacity. But for the palace, there's no room for nuance. The rules were broken, and action was required. Consider this. Every royal has faced challenges, but few have confronted the perfect storm of legal action, public scrutiny, and family tension all at once. Harry and Meghan now navigate a labyrinth of media attention, legal implications, and emotional fallout, while Buckingham Palace asserts control with a determination that has rarely been seen in modern history. And while the public debates morality, loyalty, and freedom, the true drama unfolds in private corridors, behind closed doors, where decisions are made that could affect the monarchy for generations. And just when you think the story has reached its peak tension, insiders drop hints of something even more dramatic. Allegedly, some evidence held by the palace could not only vindicate their position but also expose secrets Harry and Meghan assumed were safely buried. Documents, private communications, and confidential recordings may reveal actions and intentions that shock the public and redefine the narrative. The implications are immense. By now, it's clear that this isn't just about a lawsuit. It's a story about family, loyalty, secrecy, power, and legacy. It's a story where every action has consequences, every move is scrutinized, and every secret is potentially explosive. The royal privacy storm has begun, and no one is untouched. Imagine this: a sealed envelope, marked strictly confidential, suddenly finds its way into the hands of journalists. Inside, pages of legal claims, allegations, and internal assessments that were never meant for public eyes. For Buckingham Palace, this was a nightmare scenario. For Harry and Meghan, it was a turning point that would forever change the trajectory of their story. The leaks weren't accidental. Some say they were deliberate, a strategic play to pressure the couple. Others insist it was an uncontrolled breach, a chaotic byproduct of a palace under strain. Either way, the world now had its first real glimpse into what the royal privacy storm was truly about. The first headlines were explosive. Palace sues Sussexes over privacy violations. Harry and Meghan's secret plans exposed. Royal family hits back hard against Sussex independence. Within hours, the news spread across social media, dominated trending topics, and sparked debates that crossed continents. But what made this leak so shocking wasn't just the legal action itself. It was the depth of detail, the insight into private communications, and the allegations that suggested deliberate subversion of palace protocols. Suddenly, the story was no longer about minor disagreements or personal friction. It was about a full-scale conflict between a centuries-old institution and a couple determined to chart their own course. The documents reportedly revealed multiple areas of contention. Allegations included the intentional avoidance of security protocols, unauthorized communications with the press, and even financial arrangements that had bypassed palace oversight. Sources suggested that Harry and Meghan had engaged with media outlets in ways that the palace considered both unethical and potentially illegal. The framing of the lawsuit painted the couple not merely as independent actors, but as strategic, calculated individuals, fully aware of the boundaries they were crossing. The language used in the legal papers was precise, measured, and damning, a reflection of a palace determined to assert control and make a public example of its former royals. It wasn't just the claims themselves that shocked people, it was the level of detail. According to leaked excerpts, the lawsuit included exact dates, references to private conversations, and descriptions of methods allegedly used to bypass privacy measures. There were mentions of encrypted communications, third-party intermediaries, and even instances where advisors were allegedly misled. For the public, it was a glimpse behind the velvet curtain of royal life, a world of protocol, hierarchy, and meticulous control. But for Harry and Meghan, it was a clear message. The palace was serious, and the consequences could be severe. As the story broke, reactions were immediate and intense. Royal commentators dissected every line. Social media erupted with speculation, and tabloids sensationalized every minor detail. Some framed it as a David versus Goliath battle, two individuals seeking independence versus an institution wielding centuries of authority. Others portrayed it as a cautionary tale about hubris and the dangers of challenging tradition. Yet amidst all the noise, one truth became undeniable. This leak had changed the narrative. What was once private, a family matter, had exploded into the public sphere, leaving Harry and Meghan exposed to scrutiny on an unprecedented scale. Behind the headlines, the palace was reportedly taking no chances. Sources indicated that internal teams immediately convened to assess the damage, secure remaining documents, and prepare for potential media fallout. Advisors debated the timing of official statements, weighing the risks of escalation against the need to assert authority. Lawyers worked feverishly to ensure that the leaked content would not compromise the integrity of the case. It was a delicate balance: respond too aggressively and risk public sympathy swinging toward the Sussexes, respond too passively and risk losing control over the narrative. The leaked lawsuit also offered insight into the emotional undertones of the conflict. Certain passages reportedly conveyed a sense of personal betrayal, frustration, and even disbelief. It wasn't just about legalities. It was about broken trust, perceived disloyalty, and the consequences of disregarding centuries of expectations. Observers noted that the tone of the documents suggested the palace wasn't merely seeking legal redress. It was making a statement about the sanctity of family loyalty and institutional authority. The message was clear. Actions have consequences, and even the most prominent family members are not above the rules. But the leaks did more than reveal grievances. They introduced questions that the public and media had never fully considered. How far had Harry and Meghan gone in their attempts to control their narrative? Were their actions a series of miscalculations, or was there deliberate planning behind each move? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly had Buckingham Palace discovered that justified this unprecedented legal response? These questions ignited speculation, conspiracy theories, and endless online debate. The leaks had turned a private conflict into a global spectacle, and every new rumor seemed to escalate the drama further. In the days following the leak, additional clarifications allegedly surfaced, providing further fuel for public curiosity. Analysts claim to have pieced together a pattern of behavior: media appearances carefully timed to coincide with palace events, social media posts crafted to elicit maximum attention, and private statements framed to influence public perception. Whether these claims were entirely accurate or partially exaggerated, they contributed to a narrative in which Harry and Meghan appeared both strategic and audacious. It was no longer a story about simple privacy concerns. It was about a calculated clash of power, influence, and personal ambition. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's response, or lack thereof, became a focal point of attention. Public silence was interpreted in multiple ways: as defiance, as uncertainty, or as a tactical pause. Some insiders suggested that the couple's team was carefully analyzing the situation, preparing for a counter-response, and weighing the potential impact on public perception. Others claimed that the couple was caught off guard, surprised by the speed and detail of the leak. Regardless, the palace had achieved one undeniable victory. They controlled the narrative, at least temporarily, and had forced the Sussexes into a reactive position. But perhaps the most striking aspect of the leak was its potential to reveal unknown truths. Rumors began swirling about documents referencing meetings, communications, and agreements that were never made public. Could these revelations fundamentally alter the perception of the Sussexes' relationship with the royal family? Might they expose previously hidden conflicts, tensions, or strategic decisions that the public had never suspected? The leak raised more questions than it answered, igniting curiosity, speculation, and intense public interest. At the same time, the leak highlighted a crucial tension in the modern monarchy, the conflict between public visibility and private authority. The palace operates under centuries-old rules, relying on secrecy to maintain order and control. Harry and Meghan, on the other hand, have leveraged media, social media, and public engagement to craft their own story. The result is a collision of worlds, one rooted in tradition, the other in transparency, celebrity, and influence. And in the middle of this collision lies the lawsuit, a tangible manifestation of a clash that has been brewing for years. The public couldn't get enough. Every revelation, no matter how minor, was dissected, analyzed, and debated. News outlets ran daily updates, YouTube commentators speculated endlessly, and social media users shared screenshots, quotes, and alleged leaks. The narrative had become self-perpetuating, fueled by curiosity, emotion, and the very human fascination with scandal. In the middle of this maelstrom, Buckingham Palace maintained its strategy. Let the documents speak, assert authority, and allow the public to witness the unfolding drama, while keeping certain details deliberately concealed. And that concealment was key. Insiders hinted that some of the most shocking elements of the lawsuit had not yet been revealed. Documents allegedly contained information that, if disclosed, could dramatically shift public opinion and perhaps even redefine the perceived roles and actions of Harry and Meghan. The palace's strategy was clear. Reveal enough to assert control, but hold back the most explosive details for maximum impact. This approach ensured sustained attention, speculation, and anticipation, keeping the world watching every development. By now, it was apparent that this leak had achieved multiple objectives. It established the seriousness of the palace's legal stance, exposed alleged breaches of trust and protocol, and created a global spectacle that no one could ignore. But it also raised the stakes to unprecedented levels. The lawsuit was no longer a legal document. It was a dramatic revelation, a public test of loyalty, authority, and reputation. For Harry and Meghan, the question became, how would they respond to this pressure, scrutiny, and exposure? And more importantly, could they withstand the storm that was only beginning to gather strength? Have you ever wondered what it takes to slip past one of the most watched institutions in the world? To operate under the radar while the eyes of the media, advisors, and a royal hierarchy are trained on your every move? That's exactly what Harry and Meghan allegedly attempted. And according to Buckingham Palace, they were not subtle about it. They didn't just skirt the rules, they bent them, dodged them, and in some cases, exploited loopholes that most of us would never even imagine existed. The question is, how far did they go, and why did it take the palace years to respond? It began with communications. The palace has strict protocols governing private interactions, especially those that could intersect with the press or public statements. But insiders claim Harry and Meghan found ways around these safeguards. Encrypted messaging apps, private emails sent through third parties, even discreet in-person meetings away from traditional royal venues, all designed to minimize oversight. Some of these methods were simple, almost clever, like using personal devices instead of palace-issued ones. Others were more elaborate, allegedly involving intermediaries who would relay messages or secure private access to journalists. Each step created a tangled web that allowed the couple to communicate selectively, shaping their narrative without interference. And it wasn't just about messages. Events, appearances, and personal projects were also maneuvered in ways that minimized palace involvement. Think of it like chess. Each move calculated, each action anticipating potential responses. Appearances were strategically scheduled to attract media attention while avoiding scrutiny. Charitable initiatives were framed as independent projects, giving the impression of autonomy while still interacting with global institutions. Even travel plans were reportedly orchestrated to maximize privacy, using private jets, discreet accommodations, and minimal public disclosure. The pattern that emerges is clear: independence, control, and careful orchestration. Yet despite these precautions, the palace noticed. Advisors began tracking patterns, connecting dots, and identifying inconsistencies. Meetings that were supposed to be private appeared in media reports. Statements that were meant to be off the record became front-page news. And while Harry and Meghan may have felt clever, the reality was that the palace had eyes everywhere. The discrepancy between what was intended to be private and what was exposed became part of the evidence in the lawsuit, showing a repeated pattern of evasion rather than isolated incidents. There's also an emotional layer here. From the palace's perspective, privacy isn't merely about rules, it's about trust. And trust, insiders say, was being tested, strained, and in some cases, ignored. Imagine advisors discovering that confidential information shared in confidence had been selectively disclosed. Imagine family members realizing that the mechanisms designed to protect them were being circumvented. It wasn't simply a legal issue. It was a perceived betrayal, one that amplified tension and set the stage for confrontation. But let's talk specifics. According to sources, Harry and Meghan allegedly used several tactics repeatedly: private communication channels outside of palace oversight, selective disclosure to media contacts, coordination with non-royal organizations for personal projects, and even manipulating public appearances to create distance from the institution. Each tactic, when viewed individually, might seem minor. Taken together, however, they formed a consistent strategy. Maintain control, manage perception, and operate independently of the very structures designed to keep royal operations cohesive. And that's where the drama deepens. The palace, a centuries-old institution built on hierarchy and order, saw these tactics not as minor breaches, but as systematic challenges. Every email sent outside secure channels, every appearance orchestrated independently, every disclosure to journalists became part of a larger pattern. Advisors reportedly documented these behaviors meticulously, noting dates, times, and potential consequences. The legal argument would later hinge on this accumulation of evidence, portraying the couple not as hapless rule breakers, but as intentional strategists fully aware of the boundaries they were crossing. At the same time, Harry and Meghan's approach highlighted contradictions in their public narrative. On one hand, they portrayed themselves as progressive, forward-thinking, and transparent. On the other, their alleged evasion of privacy protections suggests a deliberate manipulation of secrecy and control. This tension between public image and private behavior fueled speculation, analysis, and endless debate. For the palace, it wasn't just a matter of enforcing rules. It was about exposing these contradictions, proving that actions and statements did not align. And yet, even with all these tactics, there were moments of vulnerability. Insiders reveal instances where plans didn't go as intended, where communications were inadvertently exposed, or where appearances contradicted secrecy efforts. These moments became critical pieces of evidence, highlighting both the audacity of the couple and the meticulousness of the palace's monitoring. It's almost ironic. The more they attempted to operate independently, the more attention they attracted, until their evasion itself became a liability. There's also a human dimension to consider. Harry and Meghan are not just public figures. They're individuals navigating personal ambitions, relationships, and desires within an incredibly high-pressure environment. Some advisors suggest that the evasion of privacy protocols was as much about asserting identity and autonomy as it was about controlling the narrative. They wanted independence, freedom from expectation, and a sense of agency. But in the structured world of royalty, these aspirations collide with centuries of rules and tradition, and the consequences are amplified dramatically. From the palace's point of view, the evasion wasn't merely about secrecy. It was about authority, respect, and precedent. Allowing even minor breaches to go unchecked could encourage further disregard for protocol. Every action taken by Harry and Meghan, from selective disclosures to private engagements, had the potential to undermine authority, not just for them, but for other members of the family and future generations. That's why the lawsuit is so consequential. It's not only about past actions, but about setting boundaries for the future. And the leaks that followed this pattern only intensified scrutiny. As the media caught wind of communications, appearances, and initiatives that bypassed palace oversight, public fascination skyrocketed. Every revelation painted a picture of a couple willing to challenge tradition, manage perception, and assert independence, but also a couple caught in a system they may have underestimated. Analysts, commentators, and social media users debated motives, implications, and potential consequences. The story became as much about strategy and psychology as it was about law and protocol. By this point, the narrative was crystallizing. Harry and Meghan were navigating a delicate balance between independence and scrutiny, autonomy and expectation, secrecy and exposure. The palace, in turn, was preparing its response, documenting evidence, and laying the groundwork for a legal confrontation that would make history. Every email, every meeting, every private initiative became part of a growing dossier, a testament to both the couple's ambition and the palace's determination. Yet even in the midst of this complexity, one question lingered. How far would Harry and Meghan go to maintain control over their narrative? And how far would the palace go to enforce authority and protect legacy? These parallel questions set the stage for escalating tension, public intrigue, and emotional drama. The story was no longer just about privacy. It was about identity, power, and family. The calm, grand corridors of Buckingham Palace have seen centuries of ceremony, diplomacy, and quiet influence. But rarely has it been filled with the tension and urgency that erupted when Harry and Meghan allegedly pushed the boundaries of royal discretion. The palace's response to their repeated breaches of privacy was not just inevitable, it was decisive. For the first time in modern history, the institution took legal action against its own family members, signaling a bold assertion of authority. And make no mistake, this was no ordinary lawsuit. It was a statement, a warning, and a meticulously calculated strike rolled into one. The decision to take legal action reportedly did not happen overnight. Advisors, lawyers, and senior members of the royal family engaged in hours of heated discussions. Some argued for a quiet, behind-the-scenes resolution. Others pushed for a public and formal response. But the breaches had accumulated to a point where inaction was no longer an option. Confidential documents, communications, and reports were compiled, analyzed, and cross-referenced to build an unassailable case. Every detail mattered: the timing of emails, the nature of interactions with media outlets, and even personal appearances that contradicted the couple's public statements. According to insiders, the goal was clear: present irrefutable evidence that Harry and Meghan knowingly circumvented established protocols. The strategy of the palace was both legal and symbolic. By bringing a lawsuit, the institution was reinforcing the idea that privacy is not just a guideline, it's enforceable. It wasn't about punishment alone. It was about control, authority, and the preservation of centuries of tradition. Advisors reportedly emphasized that failing to act could embolden other family members or external parties to ignore boundaries. This was more than a personal dispute. It was a moment to assert the enduring power and relevance of the monarchy in a modern age where privacy is fragile and media scrutiny relentless. Public statements were carefully timed. Initial announcements confirmed that legal action had been taken but revealed minimal details, fueling speculation and curiosity. The palace deliberately framed its position as measured and principled, emphasizing the importance of privacy while avoiding inflammatory rhetoric. The message was strategic. It conveyed authority without appearing vindictive, and it hinted at a depth of evidence and resolve that could not be ignored. Meanwhile, inside the palace, preparations were underway for what some insiders described as a full-scale legal and media offensive. Teams of lawyers were reviewing communications, tracking breaches, and coordinating with advisors to anticipate every possible reaction from the Sussexes. The stakes were high. Any misstep could undermine credibility, leak sensitive information, or create openings for public backlash. Every action had to be calculated with precision, balancing the need for privacy with the inevitability of public scrutiny. But the palace's strike wasn't only legal, it was psychological. By asserting authority in a very public way, the institution was sending a clear message: no one, not even family, is above the rules. Reports suggest that senior royals wanted to demonstrate that they could respond decisively while maintaining dignity and control. The lawsuit, combined with the controlled leaks, served a dual purpose, securing legal leverage while signaling to the public and to Harry and Meghan that the line had been crossed, and that crossing it again would have serious consequences. The media played a pivotal role in amplifying the impact. Coverage was relentless, dissecting the palace's legal filings, analyzing every phrase, and speculating on motivations. Tabloids framed the lawsuit as a dramatic clash of wills, while social media buzzed with theories, interpretations, and debates. Analysts highlighted the unprecedented nature of the case, noting that no royal family had ever formally pursued legal action against its own members for privacy breaches on this scale. The global attention was instantaneous, and the palace seemed to anticipate it, using public interest to reinforce its narrative. The emotional dimension of the strike was equally intense. The documents reportedly expressed not just legal arguments, but deep personal disappointment. Advisors described language that hinted at betrayal, frustration, and even heartbreak. For a family whose public image emphasizes unity, loyalty, and decorum, these breaches represented both a procedural and emotional crisis. The lawsuit, in this sense, became an instrument of accountability, asserting that personal grievances and institutional obligations were intertwined. Harry and Meghan, for their part, were reportedly taken aback by the scale and decisiveness of the response. Sources suggest that the couple had expected some form of admonishment, perhaps a private reprimand or mediated resolution. The public nature of the lawsuit, coupled with the detailed evidence compiled against them, changed the game entirely. Suddenly, the Sussexes were not only navigating personal scrutiny, but also confronting a legal and institutional challenge that could have lasting consequences on reputation, finances, and legacy. The palace's strike also included subtle messaging aimed at shaping public perception. Carefully worded statements emphasized principles rather than personal attacks, highlighting the importance of privacy for all family members. By framing the issue as a matter of policy and ethics rather than vendetta, the palace positioned itself as measured, responsible, and principled. Yet behind this measured tone was unmistakable intensity, a clear warning that this was not a dispute to be taken lightly. But the legal and strategic assault did more than assert authority. It opened new questions. How would Harry and Meghan respond? Would they counter the claims, deny the evidence, or attempt to negotiate a private resolution? And what implications would the lawsuit have for the monarchy as a whole? Experts speculated that a successful palace action could set precedents, influencing how future privacy breaches were handled, both within the royal family and in broader institutional contexts. The stakes were enormous, and the consequences were unpredictable. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was reportedly electric. Advisors monitored media coverage, coordinated with legal teams, and prepared for every scenario. Some senior figures reportedly feared a backlash, worried that public sympathy might favor the Sussexes. Others argued that the boldness of the action would ultimately strengthen the monarchy's image, demonstrating that rules and authority are enforced consistently, even at great personal cost. It was a delicate balancing act. Assert power without appearing vindictive, respond decisively without escalating the conflict further. And then came the next layer of drama, the countermeasures. According to insiders, Harry and Meghan began mobilizing their own teams, seeking advice from legal experts, media strategists, and personal confidants. Reports suggested that the couple was not planning to capitulate quietly. Instead, they were exploring ways to challenge the palace's claims, manage public perception, and maintain a degree of autonomy. Every move, every statement, every appearance became a calculated action in a high-stakes chess game. By this point, the narrative had shifted from privacy breaches to a dramatic confrontation. The palace had struck first, demonstrating both power and resolve. Harry and Meghan were now navigating a landscape of legal threats, media scrutiny, and internal family tension. The story was no longer just about breaches of protocol. It was about loyalty, authority, and the consequences of challenging centuries-old structures. Public fascination reached a fever pitch, with analysts, commentators, and the general public speculating on every development. And the most shocking revelation? Sources hinted that the palace may have uncovered information that could fundamentally shift the story. Documents, private communications, and internal assessments could expose strategies, intentions, or actions by the Sussexes that were previously unknown. The potential impact was enormous, promising revelations that could surprise, scandalize, and captivate simultaneously. In every high-stakes conflict, who you have on your side can be just as important as the strategies you deploy. For Harry and Meghan, navigating the royal privacy storm was not just about avoiding palace protocols. It was about assembling a network of allies, advisors, and discreet channels to manage their personal, legal, and public battles. But the way they leveraged these connections would later become central to Buckingham Palace's claims, raising questions about intent, influence, and the blurred lines between personal relationships and institutional rules. From the outset, Harry and Meghan were strategic in their selection of confidants. Advisors weren't just professionals. They were people who could be trusted to protect sensitive information, guide decision-making, and shape public perception. Some were long-standing friends with insight into their personal lives. Others were media experts skilled at crafting narratives and controlling the flow of information. According to insiders, this network allowed the couple to operate in ways that the palace could neither monitor nor predict. Emails, phone calls, and private meetings flowed through these trusted intermediaries, creating a buffer between the Sussexes and the strict oversight of royal channels. The communications themselves were layered and complex. Reports suggest that Harry and Meghan used multiple platforms, some encrypted and some unofficial, to discuss sensitive matters, coordinate public messaging, and plan appearances. Advisors describe a system in which critical information would move through a web of intermediaries to ensure discretion. This was not casual coordination. It was a sophisticated operation designed to maintain control over every narrative, every leak, and every response to media inquiries. The sophistication of the network made it extremely difficult for palace monitors to track movements or anticipate actions. But it wasn't just about digital communications. Face-to-face interactions played a crucial role as well. Sources indicate that Harry and Meghan occasionally met with advisors in private homes, hotels, or offices far from royal residences. These gatherings allowed for in-depth strategy sessions, detailed planning, and discussions that might have been impossible within the confines of palace protocols. The secrecy of these meetings, while practical, also contributed to the perception of evasion and deliberate avoidance that would later feature prominently in the palace's lawsuit. Equally critical were the allies outside traditional circles. Friends in media, celebrity advisors, and even certain philanthropic organizations were allegedly enlisted to support the couple's objectives. These allies could amplify messages, offer strategic advice, or serve as intermediaries between the Sussexes and the wider world. Their involvement, however, also created vulnerabilities. Every contact outside the palace increased the risk of leaks, miscommunications, and evidence of intentional circumvention of established protocols. And according to palace insiders, these very allies would later become focal points in the legal proceedings, providing context for what the palace characterized as systematic evasion. Financial and legal advisors were another key element of the network. Harry and Meghan reportedly consulted experts who specialized in privacy law, media management, and international contracts. These professionals were tasked not only with protecting the couple legally, but also with ensuring that their communications and projects remained under their control. From confidential agreements with media organizations to private charitable initiatives, every plan was scrutinized for compliance, risk, and potential exposure. The goal was clear: minimize palace interference while maximizing autonomy. Yet despite this meticulous network, the palace noticed patterns. Advisors and legal teams observed correlations between public appearances, media disclosures, and private communications that suggested intentional strategy. Certain leaks appeared to coincide with events or announcements that could create maximum impact for Harry and Meghan, whether in terms of public sympathy, media attention, or pressure on palace decision-making. While the Sussexes may have viewed these actions as independent or protective, the palace interpreted them as deliberate circumvention of privacy measures and established protocol. The emotional stakes of these alliances cannot be understated. Friends and advisors were not merely consultants. They were part of the couple's inner circle, offering emotional support, reassurance, and guidance during moments of stress. Navigating a public feud with your family while under global scrutiny is overwhelming, and the presence of trusted allies provided stability. But these same allies also contributed to the perception that the couple was operating independently of palace oversight, creating a paradox: support and protection on one hand, exposure and scrutiny on the other. Insiders also hint at moments of tension within these networks. Not every ally agreed on strategy, and not every advisor maintained strict discretion. There were reportedly instances where communications were mismanaged, leaks occurred unintentionally, or messages reached unintended recipients. Each of these incidents, while minor in isolation, contributed to the growing dossier that the palace would later cite as evidence of repeated evasion and intentional circumvention of privacy protocols. The media dimension of these communications added another layer of complexity. Certain friends and advisors were in contact with journalists, offering background information, framing narratives, or providing context for public statements. Some sources suggest that this network of media-savvy allies played a critical role in shaping the public perception of the Sussexes as victims of outdated institutions, sympathetic figures striving for independence. Yet the very involvement of external media contacts also provided the palace with tangible evidence of intentional bypassing of internal channels, fueling the legal argument that Harry and Meghan were operating outside established boundaries. Even high-profile charitable initiatives became intertwined with this network of communications. By coordinating through intermediaries and external organizations, the couple could launch projects that appeared independent of royal oversight. These initiatives not only advanced their public image, but also reinforced the perception of autonomy. However, as with communications, these carefully orchestrated moves contributed to the evidence used in the palace's legal strategy, demonstrating deliberate planning, coordination, and evasion. Amidst all this, the palace itself was not passive. Advisors, legal teams, and internal monitors were documenting patterns, tracking communications, and analyzing relationships. Every ally, every message, and every meeting became part of a larger mosaic, providing insight into the methods, intentions, and strategy of Harry and Meghan. The result was a convergence of emotional, legal, and strategic evidence, forming a comprehensive portrait that would become the backbone of the lawsuit. And yet, even as the palace prepared its response, questions remained. How much did the Sussexes' allies truly understand the risks? Were they complicit in a deliberate evasion strategy, or were they simply offering support in good faith? And how would these networks respond once the lawsuit became public, revealing layers of communication and coordination that had previously been invisible? The implications were enormous, both legally and emotionally. By now, the story was no longer simply about protocol violations. It was about networks of influence, loyalty, and strategy. The interplay between personal relationships, professional advisors, and media connections created a web that was as intricate as it was fragile. One misstep, one revelation, could tip the balance and escalate the conflict dramatically. The palace's lawsuit, in this context, was not just a legal action. It was a spotlight, illuminating a web of communications and relationships that had previously operated in shadows. The world woke up one morning to headlines that felt like thunderclaps. Palace sues Harry and Meghan over privacy breaches. Royal family takes legal action against own members. Sussexes in courtroom showdown. Social media erupted. Influencers and commentators debated endlessly, and news outlets churned out 24-hour coverage. It wasn't just a story. It was a spectacle, a cultural event, a crisis that blurred the lines between royalty, celebrity, and law. For Harry and Meghan, this was a new kind of battlefield, public opinion. For Buckingham Palace, it was a calculated test of authority and narrative control. The immediate reaction was polarized. Loyalists of the monarchy praised the palace for taking decisive action, framing it as necessary to protect centuries of tradition and the integrity of private family life. Commentators wrote op-eds emphasizing that no one, not even royals, is above the law or protocol. Finally, some said, the rules apply to everyone. Meanwhile, supporters of Harry and Meghan painted the couple as victims, emphasizing autonomy, independence, and the right to freedom from suffocating traditions. They framed the palace's lawsuit as heavy-handed, vindictive, or even punitive, stirring a wave of sympathy online. And then there were the conspiracy theories. Every leaked detail, every snippet from court documents, every rumored alliance or secret communication became fuel for speculation. Was this lawsuit truly about privacy? Or was it about controlling the narrative, punishing defiance, or preventing the Sussexes from further influence in public life? Commentators speculated endlessly about motives, intentions, and undisclosed information. The public wasn't just watching. They were theorizing, debating, and, in many cases, picking sides. For the palace, the media storm was both a challenge and an opportunity. Every headline, every viral clip, every trending topic amplified the tension while giving the institution a platform to assert authority. Carefully worded statements reiterated the importance of privacy and protocol, highlighting principles rather than personal attacks. Yet behind these statements was a deeper strategy. The palace knew that the global spotlight could strengthen their position, making the public more aware of the severity of the breaches and reinforcing the perception that legal action was justified. Harry and Meghan were not passive observers in this storm. The leaks, coverage, and public debate required immediate response, or at least careful calculation. Sources suggest the couple coordinated with media advisors to craft statements, manage social media presence, and protect their image. Every appearance, interview, or public message was analyzed for tone, timing, and potential impact. The objective was clear: control the narrative, maintain sympathy, and counteract the perception of wrongdoing while avoiding direct confrontation that could escalate the situation further. Social media, of course, became a battlefield of its own. Platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok were flooded with memes, hot takes, and endless discussion threads. Fans defended the Sussexes with fervor, citing independence, fairness, and the pressures of life under constant scrutiny. Critics attacked with equal intensity, highlighting breaches of protocol, inconsistencies in messaging, and what they viewed as calculated manipulation of public perception. The debate was relentless, global, and impossible to contain, amplifying tension and sustaining attention on the legal and personal conflict. The media also played a critical role in framing the story. Some outlets sensationalized the conflict, emphasizing dramatic moments, alleged betrayals, and hidden communications. Others offered detailed analyses, reconstructing timelines, dissecting emails, and exploring legal arguments. Across the board, every aspect of the lawsuit, every move by Harry and Meghan, and every response from Buckingham Palace was dissected, debated, and rehashed. And in this maelstrom, public sentiment became just as powerful as legal strategy, sometimes even more so. One of the most striking aspects of the backlash was how deeply it divided audiences. Families, friends, and casual followers of royal news were forced to take sides. Conversations at dinner tables, in offices, and across social media platforms revolved around ethics, loyalty, and autonomy. Was this a necessary assertion of authority, or an overreach by a centuries-old institution? Was it a fight for privacy, or a power struggle that exposed deep fractures within the monarchy? The questions were endless, and answers were scarce. Insiders also note that the palace closely monitored this public reaction, using it to inform strategy. Advisors tracked sentiment, measured shifts in opinion, and analyzed how coverage could influence negotiations or legal proceedings. By understanding how the story was being perceived, they could adjust messaging, control leaks, and reinforce their position in the public eye. Every news cycle became part of a larger strategy, reinforcing authority while keeping the Sussexes on the defensive. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan faced intense pressure. The global spotlight amplified every misstep, every delayed response, and every statement. Sources described sleepless nights, urgent strategy calls, and high-stakes coordination with lawyers, advisors, and media teams. The couple's independence, so fiercely pursued, now collided with unprecedented scrutiny, legal exposure, and emotional strain. Public sentiment could be a shield or a weapon, and navigating this duality became a full-time endeavor. The emotional dimension of the backlash was undeniable. Friends and allies reportedly expressed concern for the couple's well-being, highlighting the mental and emotional toll of relentless scrutiny. Yet at the same time, this pressure may have reinforced the perception of victimhood, a narrative that some advisors suggested could be strategically leveraged. Balancing public sympathy against accusations of wrongdoing became a delicate, high-stakes act. And then came another layer. Conflicting narratives from insiders, former staff, and anonymous sources. Every revelation seemed to contradict the last, adding to the drama and heightening public interest. Did certain advisors leak information deliberately? Were some narratives fueled by misunderstanding, or were they strategic moves to pressure one side or the other? The confusion created a perfect storm, keeping audiences glued, analysts busy, and commentators scrambling to interpret events. The palace, aware of the stakes, reportedly reinforced internal communications, tightened security around sensitive information, and carefully coordinated with legal teams to ensure that the public narrative aligned with their strategic objectives. Every public statement was scripted, every message scrutinized, and every leak carefully managed. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's team sought to counteract these moves, highlighting their autonomy, transparency, and personal narrative while maintaining a sense of dignity in the face of criticism. The backlash was not confined to traditional media. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and online forums became arenas of debate, spreading rumors, analyzing leaks, and dissecting legal filings. Fans and critics alike amplified every detail, creating a feedback loop that sustained global interest. In this environment, perception became as crucial as legal strategy, with public opinion influencing both the trajectory of the lawsuit and the emotional stakes of the family conflict. Every battlefield has its moments of retaliation, and after the palace's decisive strike, Harry and Meghan were not about to remain passive. What followed was a counteroffensive that insiders describe as meticulous, daring, and calculated. A move designed not only to defend themselves legally but also to reclaim the narrative, protect their image, and challenge the authority that had so publicly targeted them. The question was simple yet seismic. How do you fight an institution that has centuries of power behind it? The first step in the Sussexes' strategy reportedly involved assembling a high-powered team of lawyers, advisors, and media specialists. Not just any team, but experts skilled in crisis management, privacy law, and public relations. The goal was clear: anticipate every move by the palace, identify vulnerabilities, and craft a response that could mitigate damage while maximizing public support. This was a strategic counterattack, and it began with careful analysis. Every leaked document, every headline, and every social media post was dissected. What had Buckingham Palace revealed? What was withheld? And crucially, how could these revelations be reframed in their favor? Next came public positioning. Harry and Meghan leveraged interviews, public statements, and social media to shape perception. These were not casual comments. They were carefully curated messages aimed at highlighting autonomy, independence, and fairness. The timing of each statement seemed deliberate, coinciding with media cycles and palace announcements to ensure maximum visibility. Observers note that the couple's narrative emphasized resilience, courage, and the right to control personal and family matters. Every word, every image, every public gesture became part of the counteroffensive. But the counterattack wasn't purely public, it was also intensely private. According to insiders, Harry and Meghan engaged in discreet communications with key allies, legal teams, and media contacts to coordinate strategies. These channels reportedly involved encrypted messaging, in-person meetings at private locations, and third-party intermediaries. The purpose was to maintain operational security while simultaneously preparing for a multi-pronged response that spanned legal, media, and emotional arenas. Every conversation was strategic. Every ally was a cog in a meticulously designed machinery of resistance. One of the most critical aspects of the counteroffensive involved challenging the palace's narrative about breaches of privacy. Harry and Meghan's team reportedly argued that many of the alleged violations were either mischaracterized or misinterpreted. They suggested that some communications were routine, others were protective, and a few were necessitated by extraordinary circumstances. The goal was to paint a picture of responsibility, caution, and prudence, counterbalancing the palace's claims of deliberate evasion. Every legal argument was layered with emotional nuance, emphasizing intent and context over formal protocol. Media strategy played a central role. The couple's advisors reportedly orchestrated selective disclosures to sympathetic outlets, timed social media campaigns, and high-profile appearances designed to humanize the narrative. Every public statement was crafted to elicit empathy, highlight fairness, and subtly challenge the palace's framing of events. This wasn't just reputation management. It was a strategic effort to influence public opinion and create a buffer against potential legal or social fallout. The counteroffensive also involved strategic timing. Harry and Meghan reportedly avoided direct confrontation at certain points, allowing palace statements to circulate, then responded in ways that reframed or redirected the conversation. This tactic, insiders say, was designed to keep the palace off balance, maintain the perception of autonomy, and allow the Sussexes to control which narratives gained traction. The interplay between patience and timing became a critical tool in their strategy. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Reports suggest internal tension within the Sussexes advisory network. Conflicting advice, miscommunications, and disagreements over timing or tone occasionally threatened to undermine coordination. Some advisors reportedly pushed for more aggressive public challenges, while others advocated discretion and legal prudence. Navigating these internal dynamics added another layer of complexity, highlighting the emotional and strategic pressures of responding to one of the most scrutinized legal battles in recent royal history. Financial maneuvering also formed part of the counteroffensive. Harry and Meghan reportedly explored ways to protect personal assets, manage charitable endeavors, and ensure operational autonomy in the face of potential legal or reputational consequences. These steps, while largely invisible to the public, were crucial in maintaining stability and independence, preventing the lawsuit from causing irreparable disruption. Every decision was calculated, balancing immediate needs against long-term strategy. Perhaps most audacious were the moves involving narrative framing. Sources claim that Harry and Meghan deliberately cultivated stories emphasizing independence, fairness, and the challenges of life under constant surveillance. By creating sympathetic narratives, they sought to influence public opinion, media coverage, and even judicial perception. It was a high-risk strategy. Effective messaging could bolster their position, but missteps could exacerbate scrutiny or fuel backlash. The stakes were immense, and every decision carried weight. And then there were the private communications with allies outside the palace, friends, media contacts, and supportive public figures. These communications reportedly served multiple purposes, offering advice, coordinating public messaging, and strategically leaking information favorable to the Sussexes. Each disclosure, each carefully timed revelation, was part of a deliberate effort to balance transparency with discretion, maintaining control over the narrative while challenging the palace's claims. Yet the counteroffensive carried emotional weight as well.